friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be discussing my thoughts on the Avatar live action. My boyfriend and I watched it. He went in with an open mind and came in closing the gates faster than Ba Sing Se did with the concept of war. I came in with like a Zuko level of distrust on things and came out like a Zula. Let's get into it, because if I think about it too long, I might have to lay down on the floor for a while. So let's start off with the synopsis. If you guys have never seen the Avatar animated series or have never seen the animated the live action, this follows Aang, the last Airbender. He's the last Airbender because he's considered the Avatar, which is kind of like a peacekeeper for both between the nations and also within the realms, like the spirit and the physical realm. Who is born every few years to be able to master all four elements to keep peace between these nations and realms. Aang is the Airbender who gets chosen 100 years ago, and because he was not quite ready to understand the gravity of his responsibilities, he ran away and ended up frozen in ice for 100 years. Yeah, present day or 100 years later, these two siblings, Katara and Sokka, uncover Aang in the ice and free him. Now Aang has to traverse this kind of more modern world that he's in and is struggling to really, one, find his place and find out how he can stop the Fire Nation from causing more damage, because as he's the last Airbender, the Fire Nation had come in during the time he had like gotten frozen in the ice and committed a mass genocide on the Airbenders, as the Airbenders were the next in the Avatar cycle. It sounds convoluted, but it makes sense in the gist of things. Yeah, that's basically the crux of the show, is that Aang is trying to master all four elements in order to stop the Fire Nation from continuing more war crimes and more acts of terror on the other nations, which will result in nations quite literally falling apart and people dying. And what else? Trigger warnings for this: there's a lot of violence. A lot of violence in the show. Child abuse for sure, because they are quite literally children. And I think death and murder. Now, I'm sure a lot of y'all will probably be wanting comparisons from the live action to the show. Until I will be talking about some comparisons that I did have that kind of popped out to me a ton toward the end. The first chunk of this entire video is just going to be talking about trying my hardest to. There are some points that kind of mesh in with the show details, but I'm going to be trying my absolute hardest to talk about the live action as its own complete separate entity and why I had issues with it, separate from the fact that I am a fan of the show. I have read the Kyoshi books. I'll be reading the Young Chen books as I get through my TBR and kind of like, minimize that. And I've watched and read analyses on the characters and all the things, so it's safe to say I'm a fan. And if you excuse me, I have a cat. So I'm going to try to break this down into like, I guess I separated it. So I was like, I'll talk about the things that I did actually enjoy about the live action, and then we'll move on to the things I was not the biggest fan of in the live action, and that, as you can tell, is a larger portion. For the good things I did enjoy the bending. The bending aspect, I think, was a step up from the live action movie that a lot of people try to forget. I feel like this one was a lot more fast paced. It felt more natural with their movements. I will say though that the water bending is a bit slow at times. I feel like in short bursts, they definitely got the fighting and like the movements, like the quickness that the waterbenders do have from the animated show. But I feel like there's a particular scene, the fight scene with Paku, that especially felt like the waterbenders were fighting in slow motion and not in a good way. It felt slow and lethargic with the movements, but overall I thought that the bending and the CGI around the bending was also really good. I did enjoy the physicality behind it all, and it was a lot of fun seeing like Gordon and Dallas Louis kind of like fling themselves around with their martial arts knowledge to get those like movements down pat. I think the two standout character arcs from this season were definitely Sokka and Zuko's arcs. While I am very much so upset that we removed Sokka's like misogynistic arc that will last at maybe like half the season in the animated show. I'm trying to compare, but it's really hard now that I'm doing it. Like, it was easier to do it when I was writing and I was very like focused on keeping it in the show. Still, like I said, it would bleed a little bit. while I am upset that Sokka's like misogyny was cut out of the show, of the live action, I think the replacement of that, using his like kind of need to be a warrior, and like that arc of him figuring out what a warrior looks to him, what does a warrior actually do besides being physically able to fight. I think that those were really nice like points for Sokka to grow as a character, especially between the episode with the Kyoshi warriors, the episode with, I forget their names, but the father and son engineers, and then the final episode with Yue, and him talking to Yue's father about what it means to be a warrior, and Yue's father giving him kind of that fatherly advice that he needed to have heard for a good chunk of his life, that being a warrior is more than just physical strength. There's also a lot of like emotional and mental strength that comes with it, and to him, Sokka is a warrior. And I feel like that was a really nice, like, good full circle moment for Sokka to really like to really understand that the multiple facets behind what it means to be a warrior, and how he can incorporate and define his own meaning of what it means to be a warrior as he grows up and as we follow him throughout the series. As we know, we've seen Sokka in the animated show have this similar path, so I like that the kind of give and take was there. But I will say that because we didn't have Sokka's misogyny, Katara's character arc fell very flat, which I'll talk about in the portion that I didn't like. But just, again, they're siblings, and like the waterbender siblings and the firebender siblings have always kind of paralleled and have been foils of each other throughout the animated show. So without Sokka's give and take, or kind of Sokka's pushback, Katara didn't have much room to push back either. So it was really kind of like we see Katara's character fall a little flat in that aspect, because Sokka's character had more room to grow, while Katara didn't have anyone like physically like pushing down on her, which I'll get into. Zuko was definitely humanized more in the live action in this first season. I think we get to see him be more of a sympathetic character. We see more that he is not just this kid who is trying to prove himself to dad, but is a kid who had really high hopes for what it means to be an adult in this Firebender nation, and was really roughly shown how his father is not a very nice man, and that the person that he's trying to impress couldn't really care much about him. I like that we saw him get humanized more, and we get to see him become more of a sympathetic character, which I think will give us more room, or the writers more room, to grow in the upcoming seasons. And I think with the right kind of writing, it'll make what Zuko does, I think, at the end of the second or third season. And then I think that'll make what happens in season 2 more impactful. And I mean, what Zuko does in season 2 more impactful, because I think that since he is more human, he is more sympathetic, and the audience will be wanting him to grow at a certain pace. So what happens in season 2 will definitely be like a heartbreaking moment for a lot of the audience to watch, considering how he's been characterized recently, and how the ending of season 1 was for Zuko. I also really enjoyed the addition to the 41st to Zuko's arc. I think it gave him a lot more of definition as a character. We get to see him think as a leader, or try to think as a leader, as an empath. As a compassionate, thank you, as an empathetic leader, only to get brought down by his father, because his father is thinking in terms of winning, and not in terms of winning, but lacks the compassion to be a good, solid, concrete leader, and not a ruler. So I think those two characters, especially since Sokka and Zuko, I think, definitely foil each other more, have a really nice room to grow and define what it means for them to be a leader, what it means for them to be the son of a leader, what it means to be a warrior, and what those lines are for them. It'll be very interesting to see. I thought, save for Ian Owsley, which I don't know what happened behind the scenes exactly, with him talking about his Cherokee heritage, I think the casting was done pretty well. If I could put people into the frame that, that if I could like put people into like the animated show into a physical like being, I think this casting was done really well. Dallas Lee really did embody Zuko full on, and I think Ian Owsley, despite his fibs to get on the show, which again, I don't know what happened in the backstory there, I don't know, that's all I heard from it, and I didn't know what the director decided to do with Ian Ousley as like a why did you lie about this scenario, if this will ever be brought up in the future, like how Taylor Lautner brought his up in the future. I think the casting was done really well. I think they really embodied the characters, and you can tell that these actors really care about their characters, and they have a really solid foundation for what it means to be Azula, to be Katara, to be Aang and Sokka and Zuko. So it was really nice to see, like, even in the interviews, I can really see where they, like, I can really see how much love and care they have for these characters, and I hope that they'll have more of like a voice in what goes on with them as characters in the future seasons, just because I would really like to see what their input would be and how they would incorporate their knowledge of the TV show or their knowledge of X, Y, and Z into the show. I think it'll be very interesting. The last thing I did enjoy was that the acting was pretty decent. Like, I think that a lot of these actors are newcomers. I think the ones with the most like credentials that I know is probably Iroh's actor, Daniel Ozai's character, and then Dallas Louis, as he's been in a couple of Marvel projects here and there. I think obviously good acting only takes you so far. This will lead into my next point, which is the things I didn't like, but there's only so much you can do with the writing that you're given. But I think that they did a pretty decent job trying to deliver the lines and deliver the emotions that they were trying to that they had, like with the material that they had. Moving on to the things I did not like, kind of piggybacking off of the last point, the dialogue. I need writers to start reading the words out loud before they share them with the internet again, or share them with a group of people again. Like, there were definitely some lines that were painfully rough and unnaturally like delivered that I can't even like blame the actor at that point for delivering it in that way, because I can't fathom a moment where the lines that they delivered would ever make sense outside in any other context. Like, I don't know. There were definitely some lines where I was like, what are you trying to say right now? I was like, and I can tell that the actors tried really hard, and I can't even blame them. It's just how some lines were written that I just sat there and was like, do these writers not know how real people talk in real time? Like, I think we need to release certain like script writers and just let them loose in the wild to remember what it's like to talk to actual people and how people talk. Because there were definitely moments where I think Jake and I looked at each other and were like, did that seem like a weird line to you? And he was like, yeah. Dialogue just was not that great. So I'm going to need my phone for this next point, because it's multiple points. The thing I didn't like was anything involving the waterbenders in the Northern Tribe. Like, I think Han was a standout, and Han died. I was very upset. Like, I really wanted him to live. Anyway, I think anything with Yue was really kind of upsetting to me. Like, I think they used Yue in a lot of the scenes with the Northern Water Tribe in comparison to Sokka, with her explaining everything in detail. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. But it was to the point where, like, the audience could understand the context clues. Like, I understood what was happening. You know, like, the vibes are not great. You know, he killed the fish. The moon is dead. It's not good things. You know, the water they even explained it. With the moon dead, the water benders cannot bend water. They cannot do the whooshy whooshies and the swishy swooshies. You had waterbenders collapsing and CGI waterbenders screaming, I can't bend. And Yue still had to go in detail about what was going on. You had Yue shouting to Aang, oh my god, Aang, don't merge with the ocean spirit, because the ocean spirit will swallow you whole and you won't come back. And then she went on another like 5-minute explanation as to why Aang will not be returning after Aang gets swallowed up by the moon spirit and is going like a little watery Godzilla, stomping everyone away. Like, it was offensive, the amount of things that this girl had to explain to Sokka, to explain to the audience. Like, I get that the writers wanted like a darker thing, so you know, like a darker, grittier theme. So, and like this is like also like just also try to entice newer people, but it felt like they didn't understand that their audience, that the grittier audience they're aiming for are now adults and not little children. And they explained everything in too much detail. Like, even children's shows trust their audience more than these writers did. Like, I really did not need Yue explaining to me, like, in depth about why the moon spirit's important. What does the oasis pool do? Why is the moon spirit is now dead. Now everything's gone to shit. Because we can't control water, no one can bend, and we're being attacked, and it's all over. It to me, if I was like an editor, or even one of the people who make like the on-set changes for the script, I would want this scene cut. Like those moments were picked up on in context clues. Were picked up on in sharp shouts. I don't know why it was necessary to expand on it for an additional 5 minutes. It just felt like the writers didn't trust the audience to pick up context clues, and the writers were thinking that the audience are complete idiots. And it was really just, quite frankly, offensive to my ego. This is like going back into like the interviews that the creators were giving. I didn't understand the point in them talking about how Aang receives a vision of the Northern Water Tribe getting blown to bits, and is now needing to like rush his way to the Northern Water Tribe. But then, like, they tried to make Aang sound so grown up. They're like, he's not gonna want to stop to look at the penguins. He's not gonna want to visit Omashu and say hi to Boomy. He's not gonna stop the spirits from trampling a village. He's gonna want to go straight to the Water Tribe. But instead, he does all of those things still. They find annoying ways to stop Aang, whether it's, oh, they're attacked, there's a random patch of dead forest, so we have to go investigate. Like, just have him stop. Like, like, he still gets distracted on his way to the Northern Water Tribe, which at this point I was like, why make a big scene? Why make a big announcement that Aang is not going to be a 12-year-old kid at heart and want to play with Boomy? Or play with the penguins. So therefore, he still gets stopped. He still gets distracted. He like looks, I think during the spirit temple scene, the spirit like forest moment, he like looks at Aang and Katara and Sokka and goes, I know we have to get somewhere, but I need to help them as the Avatar. They could have just, like, it literally could have been, oh yeah. I don't know. It's just a weird point to have made in an interview to sound like he's not gonna do these things, and then he does them. Another thing that happened in the Water Tribe, bringing Momo close to death. Watching little CGI Momo get crushed by rocks, because he saved a little girl from getting crushed by the rocks, all to show what the pond does in the oasis pond, was offensive to my nature. Like, I think I sat there and was like, if they kill Momo, I'm praying to any deity that is around to cancel this show. Again, it was just moments like these where I feel like that the writers didn't know how to like explain anything, and they didn't really respect their audience enough to be able to understand. Like, there were other ways to explain how an oasis pool heals someone without nearly killing Momo over nothing. And then Sokka hugs Momo and it's like, don't ever do that, because he and Momo had been at odds for like 2 minutes in the show, because we never see Momo or Appa. Never see Momo or Appa. And then Momo disappears in the final conflict. We don't ever see Momo again after he's healed. Like, he's soaking wet and cold, and then it cuts out, and then that's it. Like, at the end, we don't even see them unite with with Momo or Appa. They just walk off into the sunset, like asking for food while everything's burning around them. Aang did not try to waterbend this entire season. The entire first season, book 1, is literally water. The entire culmination of the first season is Katara learning waterbending, is Aang learning waterbending with her. He doesn't even try to touch it. He doesn't even try to splash her with water at all. It's even to the point where I felt offended when Paku talks to Yue's dad and he goes, so the avatar might not help us at all. Because dude didn't even try to practice waterbending. But, he taught Katara how to waterbend. Like he, in the first bit, he tells her, oh, it's because like you're stuck in your head. You just gotta like let it go. And like Katara learns, and like he compliments her all the time on waterbending. He's like, oh, you're getting good at it. Oh, that's a, like Katara mixes an earthbender move, like where they bring the rocks up and like turn it into discs and makes ice discs for the first time. And he's like, oh my god, where'd you learn that? And she goes, oh, I was just messing around. But Aang does not try. He doesn't even try to make a bubble this entire first season. So now we have like Jake's thinking Aang's gonna learn how to waterbend off screen because Katara is now a master. And I'm just sitting here like, but the entire first book was about Aang learning waterbending. It was about Aang learning waterbending. I'm gonna switch things around here really quickly, but the Paku fight was also very underwhelming. This is the bit where it felt really slow motion, and it lacked kind of the aggressiveness that I was expecting from Katara. Again, I'll explain how I feel about Katara in a second. From Katara and the annoyance from Paku trying to put Katara in her place. It was slow motion. Like Paku's supposed to be this master bender, and somehow Katara felt more masterful in the fight than Paku did. Like, it didn't come off that he knew what he was doing at all. Like, it genuinely seemed like Katara and Paku were on the same level as a fighter, and I was just sitting here like, why does this feel so underwhelming? Like, this is probably one of the better fights of the first season, and there was nothing to it, like nothing. And to boot, I have never, in the 27, almost 28 years that I have been roaming on this earth, and now the 20 years that I have been in a place where the winds get really bad and the snow gets annoyingly annoying, have had a wind so hard that it undid the literal hair tie to my braid and undid my entire braid. Like, I saw it happen in that scene in slow motion. Slow motion, because they made a point to focus on her hair as it unfurled. As it unfurled. And I just sat there when it happened and was like, are we back in 2012? Fan fiction? Where you can take tear a literal stiletto off the shoe and turn it into flats and run, where like a little soft of like Elsa's like random little magical hair transformation is. I sat there and was like, listen, I dispel a lot of disbelief. I suspend a lot of disbelief when I'm watching fantastical shows. That was one instance where I could not do it. I watched it happen in slow motion, and then I even slowed it down to my own brain. And I sat there and was like, huh? Like, it was a full-on, like, Barbie, like, whoosh. And I was like, what? What just happened here? Like, in the fight, Katara's hair came undone because she was getting barraged. But instead, like, a puff of snow got all... I need to lay down. Okay, moving on to one of the bigger scenes that really just like grinded my gears wrong. Now, when they announced that they would be doing the literal genocide of the Air Nation on camera, I was not happy. I watched the scene and I was left especially unhappy. I'll talk about one of the other aspects when I get into the comparison of the show, but I was left especially unhappy with this genocide scene. I don't think in any way, shape, or form should there ever be a genocide scene in a TV show so brutally done and have it never be brought up again. Like, it didn't feel like it was there for a bigger message, that it was there to create a deeper meaning or like bring light into a situation at all. It just felt like it was there for shock value. Like, I don't think it was necessary. Like, I shouldn't have to watch literal bald-headed children who was talking about an amazing event that was gonna watch in their lifetime have to run into a temple and hide in a corner and then watch as their master gets burnt to a freaking crisp, knowing that they are next. Especially given the current state of things in Palestine, that was highly unnecessary. There were other ways to do it. Like, there could have been screams or like things falling, like temples falling and crumbling as shots of fire are there. But I didn't need to see someone hold for like 5 minutes as a burst of flame shot out and burned the little tornado lady, and have her scream in terror for 5 minutes before she falls and dies. There were better ways to handle a literal genocide, and putting that into a literal, like, physical thing, unnecessary. I can't put into words the reason why they would put that there, and why they wouldn't think, like, why they wouldn't try to connect it to a bigger part of the story, because it felt like it was just there for shock value. It was just there for shock value. It was there for you to, like, feel unsettled, but then nothing was done about it going forward. I don't think anything will be done about it going forward. They're trying to do some weird Game of Thrones things with a lot of, like, younger stuff, Avatar being one of them, but it lacks the nuance that Game of Thrones has and the understanding of what the horrors of these things are. Like, unnecessary. Like, there are reasons why these scenes are included in things such as The Hunger Games, such as Game of Thrones. These things have a reason, and they are explored more. I don't think this scene of the airbenders getting burnt to crisp will ever be explored. Moving on to my last point, which has a bunch of subpoints, and that is the characters. I feel like certain characters have definitely lost out in this first season, like having a set character arc. One of them being the titular character Aang. Now, Aang felt really weak and not compelling at all in the slightest as a main lead. I felt like in an attempt to make him seem like the super heroic and wise man, young boy, we lost out on making him sympathetic. Aang, like, literally even sides with Baku because he doesn't want Katara or Sokka to get hurt. Neither here nor there. I feel like he's 12. He ran away when he was 12. He still has that mentality of being afraid and hesitant of being the Avatar when he cracks open from the ice. And instead he turns into this, like, almost like a wise sage-like hero who has, like, seen the world when he hasn't even experienced the world quite yet. The things that he's seeing for the first time, and I think it would have made more sense to make Aang a more hesitant hero, to make him stick with the youth that he has, keep him young, make him want to see things that are comfortable and familiar, make him want to see the good in people because that's all he's ever seen. But instead they make him so, like, heroic and wise that it feels like these things and these characteristics should be coming from someone like me, someone my age, and not a 12-year-old who was frozen in a 12-year-old state. Like I said, he tries to be bigger than life when he hasn't experienced life quite yet. He doesn't have the understanding of what the world currently is, and he's trying to be this bigger than life person with bigger than life attempts, and it doesn't work on the screen. The next character who felt like lost out was Katara. I think she fell really flat, not just emotionally but within the arc itself. I think by removing Sokka's misogyny and removing all of the gendered issues that Katara does face within the first, like, season or two, we lost out a lot of what makes Katara Katara. I feel like as it stands right now, her main thing in the first season was to become a master, to train from the masters. And now that she's a master, I don't know where she's going to go from this. Because Sokka doesn't have that misogyny to push her down. She doesn't have the strength or the kind of the gusto to push up, if that makes sense, and against Sokka. So I think we're losing out a lot on Katara's like really strong traits that I loved in the TV show. Like, I think her rage is such a cornerstone. Like, we talk about feminine rage all the time, but we erase the rage that comes from this little like 14-year-old girl who wants to be more than what she is, who wants to protect the people that she cares about, who wants to see a better world, and who is still mourning the loss of her mother, and in some cases her father, and the relationship she wants to have with her brother, because her brother is so focused on being this hero, this protector, that he sometimes forgets to just be a brother. And I feel like without that, Katara is very flat. Like, I genuinely have no idea where they're going to take her character emotionally or mentally in these next couple seasons, because she lacks that, I guess that, what's the word I'm looking for? That motivation, that drive to be more. Like, even, that's why the fight felt so lackluster as well. Like, Katara's rage was just not there. She was not frustrated enough for me to have, like, even if they remove the gendered aspects, they could have done something with like igniting that rage and that upsetness in her in that fight, because she's had Sokka and Aang motivate her this entire season. She's been surrounded by men, by boys, the masculine, whatever you want to put it, pushing her forward and telling her, oh my god, that's so good, oh my god, you're going to be there in no time. Like, even Jet like helps her forward in a sense. And then you have this old decrepit man who tells her for the first time this entire season, no, you're not good enough, and there's no rage to it. I think that would have been a really good way to like ignite that, like, no, I'm just as capable as you, if not better, and have that be a starting point for her, like her, that like kind of like that aggressive momentum that we see Katara have throughout the show. But I genuinely don't see where they're gonna put her, and where they're gonna like transform her. Like, at this point, Sokka has a better character arc than Katara does, and has more room to grow as the seasons go. But I don't know where she's gonna go, because she's already achieved this thing. She's become a master, now she's gonna train Aang. So I'm just, it feels weird. Iroh, he felt like he was just there. He felt really disconnected from the story. I felt like his cornerstone moments from the animated show, which is the fight with the Earthbenders and then the fight with Zhao, was definitely undercut. They keep talking about him as this dragon of the West and this feared warrior. And the instances where we can see those peek through, like him trying to escape from soldiers, him fighting Zhao and his soldiers, would have been such good cornerstones to keep, but they took it out and had one, Zuko save him, and then two, have it be such a muted fight that I feel like we lost out. Like, if we had taken out the portions of Yue over-explaining what was going to happen to Aang, we could have had enough spot for Iroh to show why he is the dragon of the West, why he was this feared general who almost took down Ba Sing Se, and then bring him back to like why he's choosing peace now, why he's choosing a quieter life now, why he's choosing to lead his nephew into a better life than have now, because he saw it happen with Lu Ten, because he's seen what war does to children. But we don't see that. We don't see the bits of this sage-like general who wants to change, because we don't see the general. We see the sage. And the like parallels between the two versions of Iroh that we see throughout the animated show is just not there. Moving on to the comparisons, like I said, it's not going to be all of the comparisons. Why was Omashu turned into the siblings? So like in the books, Aang and Katara go through the Omashu tunnels, and they learn about the Omashu like legend and what happened, and they learn how people learned earthbending. In this one, Sokka and Katara go in, and the story with Omashu hasn't changed. Like, they have it's still the two lovers, Oma and Shu, who like use the tunnels to meet, and that's how they learn waterbending, because the moles help them learn how earthbending, because the moles help them earthbend. Katara and Sokka go in, and it's just weird. Like, I get why they went in, because it was supposed to show their sibling dynamic and the cruxes of the sibling dynamic, like where they're like kind of bumping heads and whatnot. But it was weird because they went in like, this is literally the scene in the live action, in the animated, where Aang and Katara almost kiss. But instead we have two siblings awkwardly walking their way through a tunnel well renowned for the love of two people, the romantic love of two people. It was weird. It made me feel icky that the two siblings were going into the lover's tunnel. Like I said, it's just instances like these where I feel like the writers didn't have a care for the source material, or didn't respect the source material enough to understand the implications of what they were doing, like with stuff like the genocide scene, the Omashu scene. I feel like we were missing these things. Like I said, I feel like that they were trying to reach some level of like Game of Thrones greediness with what they were doing, that they forgot to take a look back and understand why Game of Thrones being gritty, and why Game of Thrones being gritty, and why like Witcher, the novels and the video games being gritty were so well done. And that's because they looked back on the themes and they respected the source material, and they understood the like impact of what these things would do, more or less. Game of Thrones kind of lost it with Dany. Neither here nor there. But I feel like they didn't care much for the source material, or the writers didn't care much for the source material, and they didn't really take a look and see how what they were doing would impact the audience. I feel like a lot of things were done for shock value or just because. And I feel like it kind of like lost the messaging behind a lot of the instances, like with Ko even. Ko's introduced way early in the show, and I feel like we lost a lot of what Ko stood. Like the owl was even introduced really early in the show, so I feel like we lost a lot of things because the writers didn't respect the source material very much. Zhao was pathetic. Offensively pathetic. I think in the animated show, he was definitely deemed as more of a threat. He was deemed as someone who kind of knew what he was doing and had like a goal, you know? But Zhao in the animated show was like taught by the literal 12-year-old what to do, how to get there, and what to use. And he was just pathetic. Like, I looked at him and I felt like no like genuine threat from this really pathetic man. I thought that Zuko probably could have just bodied the dude by like kicking him to the side. It wasn't. It was like, I understand where they were going, because eventually you find out that Zhao was trained to do X, Y, and Z by Azula. He was manipulated by Azula into thinking that he could become the Fire Lord eventually. But he was still pathetic. And the last thing from the show that I'll compare to, which ties into the whole genocide scene, there was like one thing that I would have thought would like potentially redeem the genocide scene. Not even redeem, but like this is like why I thought that they had brought in the genocide scene, was because in the animated show, you walk in and see Gyatso's skeleton pressed up against a wall, and there are Fire Nation soldiers like littered around him. And like through context clues, you're like, how does that work? Because like one Airbender probably would not have survived against multiple Firebenders, but then how did all the Firebenders die? Because there's only one Airbender. And it's been like a very fun fan theory. I think it's been confirmed. I don't know. That this setup happened because Gyatso, I don't want to say Gyatso, but it's Gyatso, the badass that he is, sucked the air out of the room and killed everyone, including himself. And I didn't get that. But instead, Sozin comes in the room, and because he's the bad guy, you know, we can't have the bad guy who causes an entire genocide to die. No. He turns Gyatso into crispy pata in front of the children. I was like, there was only like one tangible reason why I would have been like, oh yeah, like this makes sense. Like bringing in a mass genocide scene, this is the only reason why. Because then it would be like, oh yeah, like think about it this way. The Airbenders have no weapons. They have nothing. You know, they're chilling like little villains. They just meditate and become one, and the only thing that they have an actual emotional connection to is their little air buffaloes. But they're capable of a lot of violence should they choose. You know, that would have been a really cool, like, this is the reason why we brought this in here, scene. But instead, I watched as Gyatso get turned into Crispy Pata in front of cowering children in a corner, and I'm supposed to be like, oh yeah, that was a really well done genocide scene. I would have rather watched Daenerys burn down King's Landing again. Like, that had more impact and more reasoning as to why I watched it than this. Like, those scenes will be imprinted in my head in the worst way possible. I think the first season is strong. There are some definite strengths of the first season, and I think with the right writers, the people who are making this work, and the correct, like, upper people, this could be a solid show. They have somewhere to go in the upcoming seasons with the correct people behind it. As it stands, probably won't go anywhere. I think the writers need to step up their game. I think in an attempt to make the show grittier, we lost out on a lot of things. Like, a lot of the themes of the show and a lot of the characters' strengths disappear. Like, even with Game of Thrones, gritty characters and gritty, like, gritty things aside, there were a lot of themes that happened in the show, and I don't see any, like, tangible themes happening with the live action of Avatar: The Last Airbender in the slightest. I feel like a lot of the things that were making it gritty were done for shock value. Like, I understand things can't be a direct copy-paste. Well aware of that. But I think that when you are remaking something, either it be from a different thing, like the live-action Winx Club, the live-action One Piece, the live-action Death Note, there has to be a certain level of care and understanding of the characters and the things that made the show good in the first place in order for it to translate well even with the changes. Like, we saw that with The Witcher. Everyone hates The Witcher because the writers don't care about The Witcher, and it translates really well on the screen when you're watching it. Now, they don't care about the source material. The One Piece anime did really, really well, and that's because the writers cared about the source material. And they tried their best to make the source material work into the story, and whatever changes they made came from a place of love and care. A genocide scene does not feel like it's coming from a place of love and care. Telling me that characters' growth, that, like, things that are hindering the things that are like cornerstones to a character's growth are not important, but giving me a 5-minute explanation as to why the Avatar being sacked up by the ocean spirit is a bad thing twice, was important. It's not showing care for the source material. It's just not. Almost crushing Momo with rocks does not care for the source material. Momo didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve that. I think in my heart of hearts, deep in my little kokoro, deep in the marrow of my bones, I don't think Avatar: The Last Airbender, I agree with Jake when he said this, but I don't think Avatar: The Last Airbender is just something that can be translated into live action. I think the audience for the original show is, like, the intended audience, when we all watch this, like, several feet shorter, is meant for a younger audience, and trying to make it more mature and grittier doesn't translate well. I think if they wanted something in the Avatar world to turn into a live action, I think Legend of Korra would be a better option, mainly because Legend of Korra, the writers were given the short end of the stick trying to write Legend of Korra. The continuity issues that people were having might be, like, salvaged in the live action, and to boot, Korra is just a more mature, like, show. We have Korra struggle with literal, like, cult leaders. We have Korra struggle with, like, PTSD and trauma. There's just more things for a mature audience to glean off of a more mature show to get a live action. Or, if they wanted to, they can do live actions of Kyoshi or Young Chen. I don't even know, are they doing Kuruk? I hope they do Kuruk. The books, because, like, there's a lot of stuff that happens to Kyoshi that had me like, oh, baby girl. And then Young Chen with her, like, discovering sound bending and then blowing someone up because they killed her sky bison. I think that would that leans to like having a more mature audience. Like definitely Legend of Korra is meant for a young adult audience. Little tiny Aang, who's learning about the world, not so much meant for a younger audience. I'm not entirely sure if I want to continue on with the series, like the live action, to be honest. There has to be like something really big and like a lot of changes that have to be made before I would feel comfortable. Potentially watching more violence, unnecessary violence in the show. I think if the writers switched around and really like sat down to understand, one, the fan base, two, the character and the source material, then I probably would. I think the only reason I would consider watching the upcoming seasons is simply for the cast. I think the cast is phenomenal in their own right, and I would like to see them move on and do larger projects, and I would like them to have like a solid base of a project that would have been Avatar. I think that's the only reason why I would watch it again and watch the upcoming seasons, is to make sure that they have something to go off of as a project moving forward in their careers. But that's about it. That is about it. But that is it for my probably really long review of the live action Avatar. If you guys enjoyed this one, let me know in the comments down below. Until then, hit like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll talk to you guys in my next video. If you guys want me to do a comparison video of like the live action versus the animated, let me know, because I have to rewatch the animated and then maybe like skim the live action again. It's a lot. But until next time, stay safe. Bye.